that was one thing that really threw me at the end of that last one when they made Ellie into a robot. Like, to what end would you do that? Like, you've killed, like you said, she was probably killed off screen, and then they make a robot of her. For what purpose? And can that be done in 30 minutes? Like,
right. Listen, dude, just sell the robot technology. You could be king of the world if you have this type of robot technology.
Enter if you dare this ghastly conversation of teens fraught with despair and recent lacerations. Final girl, chase after her, don't let her get away. But first, the Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA.
Welcome to Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA. That's Tim.
That's Andy.
And this is a podcast about horror. Every damn week, Tim and I are going to get together on the old Zoom, and we're going to talk about a different movie from the horror genre, from your well-known and well-regarded classics, down to that rare gem left and forgotten, like several prisoners of war on the back of our video store shelves. Tim, this week we're going to be talking about the 1981 slasher, The Prowler. Tim, let me ask you, what war's veterans are you most afraid of?
Interesting question. And
level, on a physical level, on a mental level.
I'll give you an answer.
Let's diss some vets. Let's do it.
The ones that I am most afraid of, World War I. Because I have no idea what happened in World War I. Like, does anybody even know for a fact that World War I actually happened? And
here's my limited knowledge. I know it happened. I can't say for sure we were involved. Were we in World War I?
I think we. Well.
I don't know. I feel terrible.
We were at least as involved as England was in Vietnam. At least
fair enough. Fair enough.
But
yeah, World War I veterans. I'm gonna guess none are alive though.
Yeah, we're safe.
Any living veterans you're afraid of? No, that's fine. World War I, great safe bet. I should not make you push it any further. Interesting. Yeah.
Maybe Korean War, because they're like, hey, fuckers, we fought too. Like, Korea happened. God, Vietnam gets. Yeah. And then literally their generation is called the silent generation, or I think it's even called it might be called the forgotten generation. Like it's just nobody talks about those guys.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, they're baby boomers though.
Well, they're actually they're sandwiched before. They're like the younger brothers and sisters of the World War II people. Okay. Like they're not quite baby boomers.
But boomers came after the World War II, whatever they called that generation, the greatest generation or whatever they were called.
Yeah,
right?
Greatest.
Them, boomers, Gen X, millennials, and then Zoomers.
Yeah, but they're sandwiched in between greatest and boomers is the forgotten ones.
Their own sub says 5-year generation of just like
right.
You ever read about the Korean War? Tangent real quick about the Korean War, how that got started. That was weird. Russia was against it, but the only reason it happened was because they were actually boycotting the UN and couldn't vote for the war not to happen. It was fucking bonkers.
That seems like it should have been figured out before a war started. Settle that. But I do
other stuff. There was a lot more than just Russia's.
I do like the fact that MASH, the popular TV show about the Korean War, actually lasted longer than the war itself.
Oh yeah, 2.5 times longer.
Yeah,
way better ratings too.
Right.
All right. Well, anyway, before we start talking about wars, we got a great little nugget of a movie to talk about here. We're talking about The Prowler from 1981. This is directed by Joseph Zito, written by Neil Barbara and Glenn Leopold. Neil Barbara, by the way, the son of Joseph Barbera from Hanna-Barbera. I might have been saying Barbera. So imagine that, like, yes, I created well-loved children's icons, and my child is stabbing women in the shower with a pitchfork.
Yeah, well, and that other writer that you mentioned, Glenn Leopold, also wrote for Hanna-Barbera. So when
I didn't know that.
When you look up the credits of, like, man, who wrote this really gnarly, like, excessively violent movie? Like, what else did they do? The Snorks. they did the Snorks too.
Damn.
That yeah. So kind of a nice juxtaposition there.
It all makes sense now.
Yeah.
And this movie stars Vicky Dawson, Christopher Goutman, and Lawrence Tierney. I mean, like, I would even say Lawrence Tierney is a stretch to say he starred in this movie, but he's pretty much the biggest name in this movie.
Oh yeah, easily.
With the lowest amount of lines. As in
exactly. right.
And the budget was anywhere, I've heard, anywhere from 400 to $1 million, but it tanked at the box office, didn't even make $1 million. This was so forgotten, but it's now regarded as one of the best, but it's still not talked about. I feel like when we talked about doing it, you'd brought it up a couple of times, and I was like, the Prowler, what's that one? So it's not one that's well known, but it's very well regarded.
Yeah,
I would think it would be at least a little more well known.
Well, and I think it's got a great name too. Like we occasionally we'll talk about the movie's titles, and horror is I think a genre that especially sort of lives and dies by its movies' titles. Because, like, for example, like romance movies, those kind of live and die more on the stars. Like if you call a romance movie like Office Jet Printer 3000, but it's got Robert Redford in it, like people were going to go see it, you know. Sure. But for a horror movie, you've got to grab them with that title. And Prowler sounds cool. And what's really funny about it is that it's kind of almost an outdated term now. Like, I
was just going to say, that's like it's because the movie starts in the 40s. I was kind of hoping the whole thing would be set in the 40s. It's not. It's set in the 80s. But it's a very old term. Like, I don't know. Like, it's certainly not a word we really use anymore. I don't know how prevalent saying there was a prowler outside was in the 80s, but it sounds 40s as hell.
It does. And yeah, it's like the equivalent of, like, when was the last time you turned on the news and heard about like a cat burglar terrorizing a town, you know? Like it's pretty much at that level, but it sounds cool. And so yeah, I don't know. I really don't know where this went wrong as far as not having a broader appeal. I'm not sure, because it's got so many great qualities. Of course, we'll certainly get to those prolonged scenes of violence that are so great in this movie. But yeah, just really off the radar. And every single, like, retrospective of slashers or horror films that I've seen always mentions the Prowler.
Yep.
And I've always felt bad for never having seen it. So glad that I did. And it works on so many different levels because of so many different things. But just to put it succinctly, the building blocks of a movie, when we're talking about the directing and the editing and the progression and pacing of the plot, the watchability, let's just call it, fantastic in this movie. It hits a slight lull about 3/4 of the way through, but it only lasts a few minutes, and it's not bad.
All right. Well, we're going to disagree on that.
Okay.
I feel it says a lot of lulls. There are a lot of just like little lulls. There is one part where it's like 4 minutes of like fucking nothing happening, but there are just a lot of just added extra shots, that didn't need to be in it. But I mean, the movie's still only an hour and a half. Like, it wouldn't. That's really the only place it suffers is from its. I don't even want to say its story, but just its content, I guess.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean.
There's a fucking solid 70-minute movie in here. Like,
oh yeah,
a near flawless 70-minute slasher in here.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's a great way to put it. So tell me more. Tell me, give me that rundown.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, this is Nan's Sum. Here we go. Tim, in 1980, a group of students are getting ready for their first graduation ball in 35 years due to the double murder that resulted in the death of the headmaster's daughter. I'm not really sure this guy's role, but while spirits are high, the night is quickly ruined by an unwanted guest who attended the last party who has unfinished business, namely killing some people.
Yes. Yeah. And we're just going to come right out and say that they were at the last party. Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'll just, cut right to the chase.
That kind of gives it away there. Yeah, well, I mean, listen, people. If you've seen a movie and there's a scene set in 1945 and then the rest of the movie takes place in 1980, something from that scene from 1945 relates to the 1980s. All right? And
it's true.
The people in that scene are dead. There's one person left alive.
Right. No, that's and it leads me into something about this movie that I loved was the beginning. Right from the get-go, we get a nice, like, old school, like, newsreel, kind of like a message. That was, I really wasn't expecting that.
Coming home on the Queen Mary, coming into New York Harbor.
Right. And it does a really good job of kind of like feeling pretty genuine. It does get a little oddly specific.
Was that real? That had to be real, because like the amount of people that are shoved on that boat, like that had to be.
Oh, I'm sure the footage was real. Yeah. But but the voiceover itself, like you were perfectly imitating there, it had that sort of staccato, 40s reporter.
I didn't think about that part wasn't part of that. I just kind of thought that was a real old newsroom.
Well, no, because it does get really specific to you, like it? With the and to those of you returning home that have been victims of the Dear John letter.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. You're right.
It's almost like, I mean, like, and if you are one of those that accidentally left your oven on in Omaha, Nebraska, on 3rd Street, when you come home, I hope that everything's all right. No, it does get a little specific there with where it's headed, but you know what? It doesn't give anything away. I don't think it just
no.
It feels like it's pretty natural.
And I will say, like, watching that, I am no fan of war at all. But man, what a sight! Like that boat with all those people on it. Like, I'm all about the wars where we end fascism. Those are okay by me. Where we, I'm not cool on the ones we start, but the ones we're kind of have to kind of get involved into and the death of millions, I'm okay with. So just seeing that sight of all those guys coming in on the harbor and just imagining the people waiting, and because we don't have the they don't have the stimulation that we do or the constant news barrage, like be like, I'll just watch that on TV or something. Like just the sight of that happening in real time, it just fucking blew my mind.
Yeah. Well, and to know that like every single one of those guys just packed onto that boat like sardines. Like it's not just that they went to one place. Like my grandpa fought in 4 different countries, like 4 different countries in Europe he traveled to fight. And so it's, you're right. It's to kind of get a little bit of the scope, the magnitude of the scope of just how much was happening in the country at that time was pretty overwhelming. And it's a nice lead into a period piece opening. So we have the really solid period piece of the newsreel. Then we go into a setting that also takes place after the war has ended in the mid 40s. And they do a pretty good job of that. I'll say that.
This is why I was hoping it was set then, because I was like, This is a very believable 40s. It wasn't like over the top, like, hey, here are 50 things you'd recognize from the 40s that makes it say it's the 40s, But no, it was just they had some like very basic costumes. I mean, thankfully it's wartime, so a lot of these guys are just able to wear uniforms, which are easy to do. But yeah, everything seemed very natural, and I was just like, wow, they got it. Like this. Sure, it's the 40s. It didn't feel like the 80s trying to be the 40s. This is really what I'm trying to say.
And we see that so many times. You're right. Like you'll see a guy, it's supposed to be a scene from 1945 and a guy's got, sideburns down to his jawline and like a white afro halfway down his back or whatever. It's like, that's not 1945. I'm sorry. But no, they do. You're right. It's great. Like it sounds like 45. It looks like 45. And they did an excellent job with that. Great great attention to detail.
Yeah. But as you said in the newsreel, some soldiers fell victim to the old Dear John letter.
Yeah.
Which is not really a term, again, that we use anymore. The
Not
last
really.
time I ever heard it used was that Judd Hirsch show called Dear John. Where he
Dear John.
Dear John. Dear John.
By the time you read these lines, I'll be gone.
That's great. I don't know if I ever saw an episode of that. I'm sure I did, but yeah, the song is so good. Okay, anyway.
It is.
But yeah, so we also open up. There is a Dear John from Rosemary. She thought she could wait. She can't wait. She couldn't do it. She is too horny.
Yeah.
And she needs the D. And she can't wait for D Day. You know what I'm talking about? So, sorry. So she's at a graduation dance with her new boyfriend. They go off to make out in a gazebo. And then trouble shows up, which it's implied that it's. Does she say something? Because I think it's implied that it's her ex-lover, right? That kills them.
Well, yeah.
It is said later on, or is it? Here's I'm a little unclear. Go ahead.
I think you bring up a great point, because there's really nobody else. Like, why would they make mention of the fact, especially after the newsreel, we go into that, that 40 setting that we're talking about. And there is immediate mention of a girl being there. And, you didn't hear she broke up with her GI veteran, boyfriend.
Right.
So already that's mentioned. And then we have a guy who clearly is dressed in some sort of fatigues as the killer when they're at the gazebo. So, yeah, I think you'd have to be pretty
chit-chatting at the beginning, and I missed some exposition. But yes. No, so it's obvious.
Yes. Yeah, I would say so, that it is definitely her, scorned ex-boyfriend.
He leaves a rose in her hand, which is the first time out of any of these movies we've really ever seen any calling card left of anything we've covered. I like that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
good, because a slasher movie, and this is certainly a slasher movie, but that's sort of like premeditated, whatever. Can't think of the right word I want to use, but just the foresight of, yes, I'm going to murder, but it's not just senseless. It's like it has purpose, and here's this flower. There's a motive and purpose behind it. They turn into craziness later when he comes back. Right, it's not explained in this movie, I'm going to say, and that is one issue I had about this. A lot of reveals where you just go, huh? Not a lot of reveals, a couple of reveals where you're like, okay.
No, you're right. You're right. Like if I was a detective and there was a young woman killed, and I know that her boyfriend that she recently broke up with just literally got back to our country and our town, like that'd probably be a phone call I'd make.
Yeah, you start there.
Yeah, right. But they don't. It
was the lover. Who would have guessed?
Yes. And no, but they don't, and it's an interesting use. I like it's not the only time that we've ever seen a pitchfork used, but I'll tell you, a pitchfork is nothing to mess around with.
No, great kill, but yeah, interesting weapon. Because where did he get it? But regardless, but yeah, he plunges it because they're kind of making out, and he through the back of the guy. And then out the back of the woman. This thing pierces both of them. Before we really start talking about any of these kills, let's just get this out of the way. This is a Tom Savini. I know he thinks it's his best work. I wholeheartedly agree with him.
Absolutely.
I know you do too. Yeah. Just some real visceral but realistic looking gore in this. And it's that classic Tom Savini exaggerated, a lot of just fucking spraying blood, but all the cuts and prosthetics look so good
Oh, they do.
It's you just accept that fucking blood gush coming out, like as cartoony as it would be in real life. You're just like, yes, I can see that happening with what's going on right now.
Right. Well, yeah, and the thing is that you have the element of the gore and the excessive gore, but what you really get, what the Prowler gives you on top of that, is the extended take, the length at which the scene holds on the gore.
Yes.
It's a good, like, 5, 6, 7 beats longer than a scene would normally hold on that. Normally you see like you see the knife slice across the throat. There's a sort of reaction. Maybe you get a close up on the blood coming out of the throat, and then it's done. But this camera just holds.
It's like working
forever.
its way in. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the gore in this is what got this movie in a lot of trouble. It was like a lot of that shit was cut out in Germany and like European. Crazy how like Germany bounced back. Talking about World War II, like they were just like, okay, guys, we know we killed at least 7 million people. So listen, no more blood in anything. Like we are cutting it all out of our diet. Like they just flipped the other way so hard, which I mean, good. Thank you.
But not only that, what I thought was really weird is like, okay, so they cut the gore, but they also apparently thought that the soundtrack was somehow too chilling, and they took out, if it is a scene in the daytime, they took out the music and replaced it with birds, and if it's a scene at the nighttime, they took out the soundtrack and replaced it with crickets.
Get out.
No, they needed this movie to have the most.
That almost sounds more fascist than they were before.
Oh no!
My God.
I'm just gonna stop right here and just say, as coincidence would have it, we are now huge in Germany. we do have a fan.
Oh yeah, that's true.
This is a philosophical question. If you're huge with one person in a country, you can still say that you're huge in Germany, can't you?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. It doesn't say that we're huge with everyone.
Not huge with Germans. But we are huge in Germany for sure.
Yeah, especially after this episode. Yeah, but no.
I loved the score in this too. Like I didn't find it chilling though. It was just so good. It felt natural.
Well, you know what there is great use of is they really just use, and I'm sure that there's probably a pretty simple musical term for this, but they just make really excessive use of a single like warbling note, like sustained note. And I mean, that note is sustained and sort of warbling for, it might be 3 minutes at a time. I mean, it goes on for a long stretch, but it's really great to build tension. It's a great score.
Yeah, Richard Einhorn did the music, which I can't say he really did anything else of note.
Right. And then we also, speaking of music, we also have Nowhere Fast, which is not only the name of their band, but maybe a description of their career.
All right, yeah, good. Because I could not find who this band was. Because
I did some research. I did some research. They're kind of like a low rent The Knack. Like The Knack was a band that was still a rock band, but kind of like teetering on the brink of new wave, but not quite getting it right. That was
That's funny. It's funny. It's The Knack because I joked to my kid. I was like, "Oh, this band is fucking awful," and I was like, I have to look them up because I know I'm going to look it up and be like, oh, the Kinks were actually played a small cameo, you know, and I'm like shitting on the Kinks now, but because the Kinks are great. But no, it's the Knack is actually probably what my mind was trying to go for.
But yeah, so we do get a nice, as we're talking about, nice introduction from the initial setting of 1945, and now the movie pretty quickly brings us to 1980.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where
we're at the same school, which did they ever really detail what type of school it is? Like it seems to be ruled by some sort of, there's the colonel guy, right? Lawrence Tierney's character who seems to be, who makes the decisions, but they're not like he's the principal, he's the headmaster. I was very confused as the type of school and the hierarchy. It's a military academy. It doesn't seem like that.
No, I don't believe it is. I think it's just a small private college is basically what it is. But you're right. I struggled with that
myself. It just seemed very generic liberal arts college.
Right.
Like
yes.
New England liberal arts college.
Right. And I, which is kind of, it's funny that you say that because the movie is set in Avalon, California.
Right.
But it certainly looks like New England because it's filmed in Cape May, New Jersey, which we have friends that visit Cape May every year as a part of their anniversary. And I have heard them talk about it being really gorgeous. I've never been there, but really from watching the movie, like I would want to go there. Like it looks beautiful, you know? Like this coastal New England town or East Coast town, not necessarily New England, but East Coast. And it feels very much like that. I don't know why they chose. Oh, I do know why they chose to shoot it there. It was because the director wanted, he liked Cape May for having a bit of what he described as like a ghost town feel.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of empty, which I think is probably pretty good because even though there's no real reason for the town to be emptied out of its inhabitants, doesn't it sort of feel like the only people in this town are the people at the university, the college? Pretty much.
2 guys who work at that store. Like that's
right. And that's it. So it does have sort of the feeling of the movie sort of focuses it on what we're supposed to be looking at, which I guess is effective in its own way. But
the police are all involved in this school too. Like they're always there.
Right. Yeah. That was a really interesting device that I think was really well done in the writing stages, where was that you and I, perfect example. I'm not gonna talk shit about it, but I am gonna bring up something about It's Alive. I don't want you to jump through the computer screen because I know how much you love it.
But, try it, go.
Okay, so one of the very few problems that we had with It's Alive was that there were times where we didn't really feel like we knew where we were, or we couldn't figure out why suddenly we jumped to a certain location or how we got there as viewers. This movie does a really smart thing by coupling our final girl with a deputy at the police station, at the sheriff's office. Yeah. So not only do we have a reason for kind of, because let's face it, a final girl is never going to go chase down and go looking for the killer. She's more like fighting him off as he or she off as they come to her. But a cop would go seek it out. A cop would go investigate. So you get your final girl coupled with the scenes that you would get from an investigating policeman. Pretty smart.
Yeah.
So that's good.
I didn't think of that.
But you're right. Our final girl, Pam, I believe.
Yeah.
And it is
played by Vicki Dawson, who I thought she looks like one of the Friday the 13th girls, I want to say from 2.
She does bear some similarity to Amy Steele, who is the final girl in 2. She does look like her. She does.
Which, I was like, oh, this girl is probably like one of those that's been in a lot. And I was like, oh no, she's only did like 2 or 3 movies. But
yeah, she does. She is reminiscent of Amy Steele for sure. And she's dating her boyfriend, Mark, I believe is his name. Mark, and he's a deputy, not the sheriff, but just like a junior deputy at the sheriff's station.
Well, are they dating though, or are they just kind of like flirting? Because there's like this weird, because he comes to a dance and goes and dances with someone else, which he doesn't feel like was a thing, but she kind of seems jilted by it, but not in a like, what are you doing? Like, we're in a relationship.
No,
it's one of those like flirty, we could, but I'm going to leave school soon. And, this guy too, I don't know. I feel like he had a very weird look. To me, wait, what was this guy's name again?
Does he look like Colm? What's that one actor? Colm Meaney or something
Colm
like
Meaney?
that?
No, I didn't think he looked like Colm Meaney. I thought he looks like a cross between if you took oh my god, now I'm forgetting his name. Who was Scarecrow in Batman movie? Damn it. You know, he was in Sunshine. He was in Dunkirk. Why can't I think of his name? Anyway, he looked like that guy had a baby with Eric Stoltz from Mask.
Yes. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, I can see that. Is it the guy from? It's the dude from. There was a movie called Red Eye.
Yes, Red Eye. Yes. Hold on, I'm looking him up.
That's not Colm. Oh wait, I have somebody's name mixed up. Yeah, but he's got an Irish sounding name.
Yeah, Cillian Murphy.
That's it. Yeah, okay. I don't know where I got Colm Meaney from. But yeah, that's the dude I was thinking of.
I love Colm Meaney, and no, I don't think he looks anything like Colm Meaney.
He doesn't.
Like the most attractive man that came from a planet of Eric Stoltz, the Mask people.
Yes, you're right. And
He's got this weird little toothpick body and a head that's way too big for it, with a skull that just seems like someone like on a video game create a character, just like maxed out like cheekbones and eyebrow, like
his
jutting parts. Yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah, and he's not a terrible actor. He's fine. One interesting thing about this, as we're sort of discussing these characters, you and I are usually really critical of movies that don't have distinguishable characters, and that we really don't care for it when you can't really tell one character from the other and they're all grouped together. This movie doesn't have like overly memorable differences between characters, but I think you kind of go with that because it is this collective school setting. Yeah. So you're like, well, yeah, there's a bunch of kids that are all the same age and maybe kind of look the same because they're all going to school together. So it's not a really great movie for picking out like this character's name and this character's name and being able to like immediately identify that. But you don't need to.
And they don't spend a lot of time. Like I only gave a couple actors at the beginning because they're really the only ones they focus on. Like there are other people have lines, but not much else. Right.
And yeah, there are some characters. I'll tell you what, the one thing that blew me away, just as a quick tangent, but it's important. This is one of, if not the only horror movie slasher that I have ever seen where a couple disappears from a party to have sex and they just get to have sex and everything's fine.
It was very early in the genre, yeah.
Yeah, that sort of nerdy, and I don't know why I would call it nerdy. The guy had glasses on. That shouldn't immediately.
They wanted you to know he was the nerdy guy. Yeah,
right. So they
act all goofy about sex. Like those two are fun. They're just they're too insecure to like really just be sexual. So everything's kind of goofy and like, but they still like to have fun with each other. I'd like that couple a lot. But still, even they are not. It's like nerdy guy and fun girl.
And he gives like the coolest like come hither line almost ever uttered in any movie. And it's, hey baby, let's struggle. Which I'm not even really sure where he's going with that, but it's kind of a cool line. But yeah, there are some characters that we don't spend a lot of time with, but as a viewer, I don't feel like we have to, you know. They do serve as recognizable enough to the plot to where we know who they are, but they also serve as good bodies to be killed.
Yeah.
And
they could have spent more time just developing two of them. For every minute the cop is like walking around a dark house doing nothing. Right. It could be spent maybe giving these characters a little bit more of humanity inside of them. Right.
Well, there's a couple. I know it's Lisa and her boyfriend. I think her boyfriend is maybe Carl.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And so there is a killing there. Now we've already talked a little bit about the gore, but this scene features a death that I don't think I've ever seen its equal. When it comes to something stabbing into flesh. And by the way, I'm not a disgusting person. Like if you told me that there was a movie that had prolonged scenes of like violence against children, like I'm not going to be like jumping up and down for that, right? But you tell me that a slasher has prolonged, extracted scenes of its gore, and it's
now, and we say prolonged, but we're talking like 5 seconds.
Well, yeah, prolonged for what we're used to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But one interesting thing here, there's a couple interesting things. First of all, the pitchfork that she gets in the belly in the shower. This is a friend of our lead, our final girl, Pam, is killed in the shower while she's getting ready to go to the dance. And it's just outstanding. The skin tone matches her skin tone regularly. I mean, perfectly. Her boyfriend also gets a great kill.
His is my favorite.
One of the rarely seen stabbings through the top of the head. So for you medically inclined folks out there, right through those sagittal sutures in the top of the skull there, into his brain. And what's so crazy is that we're so believed with movie violence that any brain damage, any direct damage to the brain is like instant death.
Right.
But this guy just keeps on living. Like, and I'm not even talking about his second appearance.
Right.
Right. But in that scene, he's stabbed down through the brain
with like a bayonet knife too. Like this is a like 16-inch blade.
But whatever is left of his brain function is functioning enough for him to just not die.
Oh, and his eyes pop open, but they've like rolled back. So it's just these stark white eyes. Oh man, like that's the moment where you're like, oh damn, what the hell?
Yes.
But yeah, normally it would just like, this is made in 1984. This is a Friday movie. Yeah, it's like you hit the top, you see the little thing poke out the bottom, maybe hear like a and that scene's over.
Right.
But this is through the top. You see it come out. You see blood flowing out. Then you get a full shot of his whole head covered in blood. Then there's another different shot where the eyes fly open. So good.
Yeah.
So visceral.
Yeah. Really, far and away. I mean,
it looks better than most shit that came after in the subsequent years, as far as like, you know, the amount of blood is not realistic, but the just the look of it. It didn't look like an effect almost, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And there are just enough nuances to the gore effects in this movie to feel like we're just going above and beyond. And not to jump ahead, but there's one particular kill in a swimming pool, which was a pretty interesting shot. But when that blade goes into the throat, not only does it slice the throat, but it nearly decapitates.
Oh yeah, it's like digging in.
Yeah,
and then see how soft the flesh is, and so you're just picturing how sharp that knife is, and the way the blood is flowing out. Now that kill is great, but the moment right before it, probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a slasher movie, because she's in the pool by herself and she's going to get out of the pool and the killer just fucking kicks her in the face.
Yes.
For no reason. Like normally any action by the killer is then how that person died. You know, they don't usually fuck around. So, you know, normally it would be like, oh, there was some sharp object on the end of the boot when he kicked. No, just fucking kicking her in the face to disorient her so he can get in the pool, because it's another movie where people hide in pools very, very well.
Yeah, it's like not only is he murderous, but it's like maybe he stubbed his toe right before he got to the pool and he's like, motherfucker, and like he was pissed off.
It out at her and then oh God, I'm here to kill her. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Right. But then the oddities kind of continue, because she gets that boot to the face, which, don't get me wrong, would disorient you.
Oh yeah,
but then
it's brutal, but it's
she kind of flops around in the water, sort of going nowhere for a while there.
Yeah.
I guess it's.
But I just kind of bought that as disorienting.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? Like, well, you want to immediately go back to the ladder to get out of the pool, but that's where you just got kicked in the face. So, you know.
Yeah, no, it's it was the kills are worth the price of admission. It's not to say that the rest of the movie, isn't, but the kills make this movie 100%.
Yeah,
and there. Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
So the action kind of pretty quickly continues and pretty steadily. There isn't a whole lot of plot development once we get going, and once the bodies start stacking up. There are a couple reveals where they our Pam, our final girl, is first initially attacked, and now we're really seeing our killer full on, and it's military fatigues top to bottom, kind of in a way you've never seen before. Like there's a cover over the face. How would you describe that?
Yeah, it's like he's got like a mesh on his face, but then also like a hoodie that's drawn very tightly. So he's got a very like you would picture someone who's just outside in like a heavy snow, like in like the full Arctic, and they've got as much of their face covered, but then he's also got this weird mesh over it, just so you can't see his face, I would guess. And we don't really see the killer from, not to say who it is, we don't see the killer in the 45 version, just some gloves and whatever. We don't see his face. So I'm imagining he didn't have this get up. I don't know, maybe he did. I don't know. It didn't look very 45. It looked more Korean Vietnam War get up. Yeah.
No, you're right about that. It did have like he's got these really cool sort of army green spats on over his calves that extend down over his shoes. Like it's a cool getup. Like, I mean, it's intimidating. I mean, it works well for the look of a killer.
We didn't mention that Pam had, like, I think she works for the paper, right? Or the school paper. And she did an article about the killings from 35 years ago. And the head of the school, Major Chatham, has then put an end to the graduation. So she was kind of doing this article because it's the first time they've had a party since the murders. So that she has that knowledge, at least. As you're saying earlier, yes, we're able to now pair up someone who has a knowledge of the past and someone who's investigating the present. And they're able to work together like that.
Right. And so when you have that first encounter with her, she does have, she's investigative by nature. But when she first encounters the killer, it's just because, somebody spilled a drink on her dress at the party. She's walking back to her place to go ahead and change clothes, encounters the killer. And then the thing that really got me is she finally gets out of the fucking building. Like she's running away. Yeah. She finally, and then
a lot of tropes and mistakes in this escape as well.
Right. And then she gets, and where did I write down? I wrote
Go ahead.
I wrote, kill that fucker in the wheelchair, because she finally gets out of the building and she's running away. And then this old dude, who is Major Chatham, grabs her, isn't saying anything because he's had a stroke, but he's grabbing her, not letting her go. And it's like, just fucking let her go. Like what is he? You almost got the impression that he was holding her to keep her so she did get killed, which is not the case.
Yeah.
But
are you sure? What was the case? Because you never see that guy again.
And you never know why he was wheeled out of his house to be there in the first place.
Yeah, because they introduce him a little earlier about how, like, he kind of has the house across the street from this girl's dormitory, and they're just like, he just sits in that window and creepily stares at us the whole time. So that's part set up. It's set up that he makes the decisions. And then he's got that bit where he grabs her, and that's all he's talked about.
Right.
It's nothing about him has ever resolved. I mean, kind of. You find out that the girl who died was his daughter Rosemary in the beginning was his daughter, and that's why he put a stop to the. But that's hardly like a news, or people would have fucking known that at the time,
Right. And
I don't know how she didn't uncover that through her investigation.
Yeah. And I think that the only reason why they must have done that is just to clear out the Chatham house so that she can go there with Mark, because obviously after this attack, she gets away from the killer. She gets grabbed by Chatham. Then she goes and finds her boyfriend, Mark, the deputy, and says, like, I just got attacked. And then, Major Chatham grabbed me. So the first thing they do is go check out the dorm. They don't really see anything. Then the next stop is Chatham's house. That's where she begins to unearth the truths that you just described.
Because Mark is walking around for 15 minutes. She's snooping in the den.
Yes. And
the rose.
Yeah.
In a picture in a book of Rosemary. But
and
point out that the deputy is kind of in charge because the sheriff's out of town on vacation. Sheriff leaves in the beginning.
Yeah, it's an important bit of information there, that the young deputy is left to his own devices, and it's up to him to police the town,
which is only the school, so it's fine.
Yeah, right. But the thing is, what's funny is in this movie is like everything that we just described is happening, right? So you're getting the plot is quote unquote thickening. I mean, there's things happening, there's discoveries being made, and none of those things are bad. But the thing is, what's funny is as a viewer, like, you don't really care. Like, it's good to see something developing, but you're like, the tension is good. The scenes are moving along well enough to where you don't really need to have a story really, or I should say like plot checkpoints fulfilled. You're just enjoying the movie. I mean,
there are a lot of good like directorial moments in this movie. Like, you don't expect a lot from a slasher, especially one from the early 80s. Those were very raw and kind of basic, but even in this, like, there's a shot where they're getting ready for the ball, but you also see the killer like getting dressed up. I'm like, oh, what nice. Like a juxtaposition of our victims and our killer both going through the same routines. Like they both are going to have the same night, just different results, like those things, or like different shots through that weird wavy, the shower door. They're just like some very cool moments where I'm like, oh, like there's some actual artistry here. There just wasn't enough to support it. But it wasn't lost on people, because the Friday the 13th people watched this and were like, we fucking loved this movie. Please come direct part 4, which in my opinion is the best or the second best. I mean,
yes, no, absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%. And you're right. Like, again, we've mentioned it. We talk about it all the time. But yeah, this movie has a level of professionalism when it comes to the directing, when it comes to the advancement of the plot, when it comes to transition from location to different location. All of it makes sense. You never really feel lost as to where you are. It always feels like it's moving forward. It's got that high, as I always talk about, watchability factor. So all of that is fantastic. And there's this great little scene, and how I just love like small little cameo, not even cameo performances, but just when an actor or actress doesn't have a lot to work with, but they just for some reason just nail it. Miss Allison is kind of one of the people in charge.
Yeah.
She's employed by the college. I don't know what you'd call her, like a den mother or something like that.
Mistress. Yeah, another undefined role in this school.
Right, of some authority. And she is the one that has to get up in front of the students who are attending the dance and make an announcement that there is a prowler outside and that all the students have to stay at the dance. They can't leave and go back to their dorms. And I don't know what it is, but there's just something really down to earth about her.
Yeah, I looked her up because I was like, what other stuff has she done? Because she's very good. Just very
she's great.
Does a lot with that role. I loved her. Now, on the other side, how about Bill Nunnery as the hotel clerk where the sheriff's supposed to be staying?
Oh my God. I've got several issues there.
This scene is an example of a lot of scenes in this movie where they're just too long. They kind of are okay. Like this scene is like when someone shows you like where they're like, dude, you have to watch this YouTube video real quick. It's not that long. And you start watching it and you're like, this is pretty, like, I'm entertained by this. Good concept. And then you look at the runtime and you're like, oh God, 625. Oh, Jesus. Do I have to watch this whole video? All right, fine. I thought you said it wasn't very long, like that's a lot of, but this fucking hotel scene is that in a nutshell.
Yes.
The deputy calls where he thinks the sheriff is, and it's this huge fat guy who's so put out by having to do his job. Like the guy's a cop and he's like, this is emergency. I need to get a hold of this sheriff. And he's like, I just got here. I'll go check. And then he just doesn't.
Right. And yeah, but you're right. It's like, why do we need to spend that much time doing that? Like, I mean, I appreciate the attention to detail, but how much detail is there really? Because first of all, this is supposed to be taking place in California. The hotel clerk has a Southern accent and he has a Boston Red Sox hat on.
Right.
So I'm not
right.
I'm not really sure what's happening there. Also, I know that chewing tobacco is indeed called chewing tobacco, but I've never seen anybody chew it as much as he does.
That's
do you
agree, man? No, I've seen people do that.
You really fucking just chew on that?
Well, I mean, he only did it. What, you kind of put it in and work its way in. Yeah,
but he is
chew it to get it going a little bit.
Yeah, he's just like tooth just chomping on that stuff.
But that's a scene where, because it could be very funny, because it's like he says, yeah, I'll go check. And he just sets the phone down at the desk and kind of slams his little partition door next to him and then starts eating a bag of chips. But in this scene, you listen to him eating I forget what he's doing, but he's playing cards and doing something else. And the cops just, the deputy's just on the phone waiting. And then the guy slowly closes the partition door again, then gets on the phone. That scene is way funnier and way quicker if he does the whole bit of, I'm going to go check, and sets the phone down. And the cop hears him playing cards or eating chips or something. It's just you motherfucker, and hangs up, and moves on. But
right.
Just waiting for this fucking bit to develop is excruciating, which could have been a very funny and memorable part from this movie.
You're right. Most directors would have him, if he's honestly not going to go check on the cabin, he's going to put the phone down, and then the director's going to give us some sort of recognition of time. We've been at this for a couple of minutes and we've somehow jumped time. But no, we literally just have to sit there for, like you said, the whole 6-minute fucking YouTube video.
That would have even been funnier if you have that. He's like, I'll go check, and obviously isn't. Now we cut to a scene at the school or something and then cut back.
Yeah.
Still waiting on the phone. Way funnier. Shit.
Yeah, that works.
You're right.
But you're right. Yeah. So there are some scenes that aren't, really played out, or they're either too played out or that time could have been better spent, like you said. And I agree with you. You're right. There is a good chunk of time of this movie of people just sort of walking around and exploring, or
they go to a location and then leave and then come back to resume what they were doing at that. They go back to the Chatham's house 2 times.
Yeah. And the thing is, if they were just walking around in the first place and then they come back to do more walking around, that's not overly necessary.
Yeah.
But that's fair. I wouldn't say that it's enough to really just make you want to turn the TV. I mean, I've had movies where I got so bored I just didn't even know if I wanted to finish it. I wouldn't say it's on that level.
No.
But yeah, it does,
because the performances are good. Not even in this is good for a slasher movie. They're just good performances.
Yeah. No, it is.
Some of the bit guys are that I'm just a cardboardy actor in a horror movie. I don't know what to do. But all of our leads, even down to as you said, what's her name? The Miss Allison. even down to that. Like normally that part is a shit part or something, you know?
Right.
But other than like they're two guys, two like weirdos who work in a general store, those are our worst performances. And one of them is there just to be a red herring.
Right.
You think he's the killer because he's weird. Like that's it.
Yeah. And so
go ahead.
But yeah, and we've talked a little bit more. I mean, here we are. You know, this is certainly, like, no question about it. This is a slasher movie, right? So we've covered some movies in the past that have kind of teetered on the edge of that genre. You were right in the thick of it here, and it does make me think, because of our last episode last week when we were talking about the idea of women in film and the presence of women in film and how these films treat women. And absolutely, at the time that these movies were coming out, you had Roger Ebert comes to mind. He said, literally, he said, these films hate women.
Yeah.
And I think he was really just off the mark on that. You know, obviously the fan base, I feel, is pretty even between males and females. And ultimately, like, you can't deny the coolness and the power in the final girl trope. Like that's a really honest, conscious decision to say we are ultimately going to hand over all the strength and all of everybody lives and dies by this one person, and it is undeniably a woman.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't see the misogyny there. I don't. I think that I think it's bullshit. I think that these are really, really empowering films for women, and probably gave birth to some of the series and movies that came after, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and you know, Charmed and various other programs and stuff that really empowered women. So I don't know. I enjoyed it. I don't know how memorable of a final girl Pam is, but I think she does a fine job of it, you know.
I don't know, you know, if we're looking at the Bechdel test, I'm not sure if this does. There might be a scene where like Miss Allison is talking to another woman about the school or something. Like that's literally all it takes.
Right.
I'm trying to think, because there's a scene where when Pam's friend is taking the shower and she comes in, but even that is like, I think she's like, oh, I'm waiting for Carl, I'm just getting ready, you know. Even that is like, we were talking, I'm doing this to wait for a man, or I'm doing this for a man. Like that's how it fails the test. So this was posed after I saw the movie, so from this point on, I'm gonna keep an eye out on it so we can answer our viewers question, or listeners' questions about that they pose us. This one being, if you didn't listen to the last episode, you know, did these movies pass the Bechdel test, which is two women with agency talking about something other than a man. That's all that matters.
I do. And by the way, I don't want to condemn the idea of that, because I find that really interesting. I find that fascinating. And I do think it's a cool thing to look for. And to maybe,
and it's totally, it's a different beast than just straight up misogyny, because I can see how people see this and see women murdered in a brutal way and be like, that's just hardcore violence against women. And while it happens to the men, there is a thing in our culture where it's like, well, men, you know, kind of deserve it. You know, they're the more aggressive sex.
Live by the sword, die by the sword.
Exactly. So yeah, like it's not a surprise, but you know, this woman doesn't deserve that. But yeah, as you said, they do ultimately give her all the power. She saves the day. She's the hero every time.
Right. So yeah, it's I think it's a movie that deserves far more credit than it gets. I'm not going to put it on the same level that I would say like Halloween, you know, the original, or Nightmare on Elm Street or something. But it certainly deserves to be much more highly discussed and regarded than it is. And it is, like you said earlier, it is regarded very well by the people that are very immersed in these circles. But I think for the general population, if you're like myself, who did not see this movie, I absolutely recommend it. I think you should go out and see it. It's a good, straight up quality slasher that it's excellent. You should see it.
I recommend it too. The dragginess is its really only drawback, and there's a really, really solid ass movie if you took 10 minutes out of this movie. Oh, before we wrap it up, we should we didn't talk about the very end, the reveal of the killer.
Oh, yes.
So our final girl is finally struggling with the killer. And it's weird because I've read, in some of the synopsises I also read, it's like she ends up unmasking him. But watching the movie, it seems like he's like, I hate to give anti-maskers some credence here, but he's like, I can't fucking breathe with this thing on my head. Like, ends up like ripping his own mask off to reveal that it is the sheriff who's left. The sheriff is the killer. Yeah. And that's one of those moments where I feel like I had the same expression as Pam, where she like sees it and she's like, Sheriff Frazier?
Right.
And it's like, and then he dies and there's no connection to him from the beginning, right? They like,
right.
Not a line of dialogue is like,
yeah.
Oh, or like, oh, here were his medals to show that he was in the war. Anything to tie him. It's just like, oh, it was this guy. And you're just supposed to go, oh, okay.
Right. Yeah. You almost expect her, like here he is unmasked on top of her, trying to kill her, wrestling, for this double-barreled shotgun with her, so to see if he can shoot her and kill her. And you're right. She says, Sheriff Frazier, and you almost expect her to be like, how was your fishing trip?
Right.
Like, I mean, you just can't believe that this dude, it just, like you said, there's no indication. The only thing that you could maybe see as some sort of connection is that he makes a comment, an offhanded comment to Mark before he leaves to go on his trip, so to speak, where he says something, he's asking about some girls. And he's saying that, because I think he knows that Pam, and Mark are kind of flirty with each other. And I think he makes a comment like, oh, Pam shouldn't be hanging around that type of girls, or they don't seem like the type of girls that Pam should be around, or something like that. Uh-huh. So it's not really that weird, but he's passing a little bit of judgment on, loose women, I guess, or something like that. So I don't know. It's a bit of a stretch. Either way, they certainly do a good job of making you forget that the sheriff is even in the movie.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So,
but yeah. So yeah.
The sheriff did it. Yeah.
The sheriff did it.
Yeah.
It's as underwhelming as it sounds, but it doesn't ruin it. It doesn't ruin what came before it, though. I wasn't expecting any. There's nothing set up for there to be some cool gargantuan reveal. I mean, yeah. When you think about it, the sheriff's kind of the only guy introduced who it could have been. It's either going to be the sheriff or someone we've never heard of, or it's actually the red herring weirdo from the store.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it doesn't come across as too weird. It's not like, Roy Scheider is actually a great white shark. Like it's not that strange. Like it kind of goes like you buy it. You're like, okay,
yeah, So yeah, he's the right age. Okay, sure.
Yeah, and I did. Yeah, you find yourself doing some quick math. Like, okay, how old would he be now? And I guess like at that time in '80, a veteran would be like, I guess from World War II, probably early 50s, early to mid 50s.
Yeah. Well, and there is a part where he's chasing her, where when she finally figures everything out, and like then he's in the house with her, and he's got a rose, and he like says something about going on a date, or something like that.
Oh yeah. So
then I was like, oh, who was the guy at the beginning who said, hey, I read your article? Like I remember someone mentioning they read the article, and I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be like whatever obscure guy at the beginning. He's kind of been an obsessed classmate or whatever, and like loves her writing or whatever. But then I was like, oh, the sheriff? Oh, all right, fine.
All right.
Sure.
Yeah, it all works. In large thanks to the gore, to the action, to the kills, to the professionalism of the filmmaking. It's all forgivable.
Yeah.
So it works
totally. Its pros outweigh its cons by far.
Yes.
So I recommend. Okay. Well, Tim, that was The Prowler from 1981. I had a lot of fun watching this. Next, I hope you have a lot of fun because you haven't seen this. I have. I'm going way back, 1978, the movie Magic, starring Anthony Hopkins, Burgess Meredith, and Margaret.
Oh, that's what year is it?
1978. So this is a young Hopkins. He still looks old, but it's like,
of course,
it's so weird. Yeah, it's so good. I love it. More of a psychological horror, but there's still some killing in it and stuff. But I'm excited. Hopefully this is not like Halloween 3 where I'm like, I remember watching that once and I loved it and I can't wait to watch it again. And then not like it. This one I feel I will still like, but I have not seen it since I watched it once in like the late 90s and loved it and just haven't. It's never, like I have not heard that movie mentioned in at least a decade, even just arbitrarily.
I don't know. You know how sometimes you say that you've heard of something, but you're not really sure if you actually have heard of it or not. Like I think I've heard of that movie, but
Right.
that's how clueless I am about it. I know nothing of it, and I think I might. Because sometimes I'll do a little bit of research before I watch a movie if I haven't seen it. I might just flat out watch this one first without knowing anything about it.
Go blind into this one.
Okay.
Because that's how I watched it. I knew it had a ventriloquist puppet, but that's it. Like, so I had a lot of fun when I watched it because there are just a lot of questions they go through. That's why it's more psychological than like your standard horror movie. There's just a lot of like fucking mind games and shit like that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. So that's going to be next week. Everyone, please follow us on Instagram at Slumber Podcast Massacre. Send us an email at slumberpodcast@gmail.com. We'll read it on air and talk about it. And maybe it'll become a little bit in the show like our Bechdel test is now. Also, patreon.com/Slumber Podcast Massacre. Thank you so much to our patrons. You help make this show possible and easier to do. So that's all I got on the Prowler. Tim, you got anything else to say about the Prowler?
Well, I don't know if it's so much about the Prowler, but I just want to say, I didn't get a chance to say it last week, but I do want to say to you, Happy Halloween. And to you, to all of our listeners in the United States and beyond, and in Germany, wherever you may be, and to you especially, my partner in crime here, happy Halloween, and I just have the best time doing this show, and thanks for doing it with me.
Happy Samhain to you, my friend.
God bless you.
All right, see you, Timmy.
See ya.